Hello, welcome to another video. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Today I am here to talk to you about my favourite fantasy worlds. I am a big fantasy reader. If you've been here for any amount of time, you will know that. And I love myself a believable fantasy world. I love to fall into a fantasy world. Not necessarily somewhere I would want to visit or live, but just somewhere I can fall into fictionally for a little while, because we all know that there are certain fantasy worlds which are really great on paper, but realistically, if you were to go there, would it be the best choice? Probably not. But I have a bunch of fantasy worlds that I would like to talk to you about today, in no particular order, but some of my faves, so I'm looking forward to diving into this with you. But before we do that, big thank you to today's sponsor, which is Skillshare. You have probably heard of Skillshare. They are an online learning platform for creatives to come together to learn new skills, develop their existing skills, satisfy their curiosity, and so much more. It's a really easy to use platform with classes on all sorts, from photography, illustration, fine art, marketing, filmmaking, creative writing, all sorts. And I stumbled across an interesting class on there for creative writing. I'm not necessarily a writer, but if you're a writer, then there's plenty of classes on there that would probably be really useful to you. But one that I thought sounded really interesting, and if I ever did get into writing, this would definitely be something I would be interested in looking into, is Science Fiction and Fantasy: Creating Unique and Powerful Worlds by Lincoln Michelle. There's a bunch of classes on there, but the class is overall only an hour and 2 minutes long, but it's probably going to be packed with interesting things. And if you look at the project resources, you can see that there's like tasks to do throughout it. So one of the great things about Skillshare is that all of the classes are pre-vetted. They're all checked, they're all already up to scratch, so you know that what you're getting is quality, and it's always a great mix of listening to the wisdom of the teacher of that particular class, but also active and engaging tasks to get you doing what you're learning as well. So it's a great mix of those things, and this one also looks like it would be. Alongside the classes already being pre-vetted, as the platform is curated specifically for learning, there are also no ads, and they are always launching new and inspiring classes, so you can focus on whatever you want to, whenever you want to, with no disruptions or distractions, and go wherever that class takes you. And with an annual subscription, it is less than $10 per month. However, if before you want to make a commitment to a subscription, you want to give it a go, I am happy to let you know that with the link in my description, the first 1,000 people to click through will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. So go ahead and click that link. There is a whole treasure trove of learning opportunities for you to unlock. That sounded really cheesy. That wasn't scripted, I just said that. But yeah, thank you ever so much for sponsoring this video, Skillshare, and I hope you check it out if you fancy. With that being said, let's get into some of my favourite fantasy worlds. I've got a little pile on the floor here. We've got some middle grades, some adult, some YA, so I'm just gonna dip into these and have a little chat with you. One I have here is The Polar Bear Explorers Club by Alex Bell. I love polar fantasy. We know this. This is no secret at all. And this polar fantasy world is so interesting, so fascinating. There are so many different creatures that live in this world. Of course we have the humans, the polar bears, but we also have yetis, carnivorous cabbages, frost fairies that give you frostbite, but like frostbite. There are so many different creatures. There's magical ones, mundane ones, and they all come together in this snowy, blissful landscape. But on top of that, we are given glimpses into the rest of the world and how the world has these different terrains. So although we have the Polar Bear Explorers Club, the follow-on trilogy to this is going to be the Ocean Squid Explorers Club. So we're going to get more of this world. We're going to go under the sea. There's also the Desert Jackal Explorers Club. So there are the desert vibes here as well. So it's a really expansive world with all of these different elements that would sort of make up to be a world as you know it, like the Earth as we know it has these different terrains. We have the snow, we have the deserts, we have the ocean, but in a fantasy way with all of these different magical creatures and the explorers clubs that go on these adventures. I think it's wild fun. The carnivorous cabbages gets me every time, because although there are the normal creatures that you would expect and some of the fantasy creatures that you might expect, like a yeti, the fact that there are just these wild things that you wouldn't see coming, like live cabbages, there are tiny penguins, like pocket-sized penguins as well. So it's a great mix of everything all in one and a good fun adventure story as well. So I'm a big fan of the world in this one. Next up I have A Winter's Promise. Unintentionally going for the winter vibes first. That wasn't the plan. But this world is really fascinating because the world is very split up. So in this world, everything is split up into arcs, which are like these floating islands. And each arc contains a family spirit and all of that family spirit's descendants. So the world is very segmented and each of these arcs are very different. We haven't been to a great number of them yet at this point. We've been to Anima, we've been to the Pole, and we've been to Babel. But just seeing those three, like, you can see how different each of these arcs are and how each of these arcs have developed their own culture. And knowing that there are so many more of them, and they're also secluded unto themselves, it's just really fascinating to me. And we have our set of characters that are on a particular quest, meaning that they have travelled through a couple of them. It's just really fascinating to see, and each of these family spirits has a family power that they pass on to their descendants. So each arc, as well as having like their own culture that they've developed, have a particular magical ability that will have shaped their arc and the way they live and the way their people have grown. So it's like lots of different worlds within this one fantasy world. I just think it's really fascinating. And our main character, Ophelia, in this one is from Anima, who has the power to read the history of inanimate objects by touching them. She can travel through mirrors and she can animate inanimate objects. And she's sold in a political marriage to Thorn, who is from the Pole, where their family spirits' powers are a touch more violent. But it's really fascinating to see how they all work and how I can't say what I was going to say because spoilers, but it's just a really fascinating world. I'm a big fan. I've become a big fan of this series. I like it. Next up, it wouldn't be me talking about fantasy if I didn't mention A Darker Shade of Magic by Victoria Schwab. I am trash for Victoria Schwab. This isn't a secret at all. But how could I not mention the parallel Londons when we talk about fantasy worlds? Because Red London is fantastic. White London is absolutely terrifying. And Black London is a mystery to us all. This is fantastic. Obviously. About a Antari named Kel, who is one of the last of his kind to be able to travel through parallel worlds. And he comes from Red London, where everything is touched with magic, everything is beautiful, everything is fantastically magical. And we have Lila, who's from Grey London, which is our London, and the mundane. So we have the contrast of our dull Grey London and then magical Red London and Kel's exploration of the both, and then the visits to White London. And although they're all named London, they're very different places, but all somehow tie together. And I just think it's a really cleverly woven world. I'm a big fan. And also helps that this book is one of my favourites of all time ever. I absolutely love this series. So when I think of a fantasy world that I would want to visit, Red London comes to mind first, but maybe like way after the events of these books. Maybe. Next up, the World of Bronte Metalstone, just because it's so wacky. It's a really fun middle grade world. There are dragons, there are elves, there are fairies, there are pirates. There's all sorts, and I love it. It was such fun, and really, that's all I have to say on this one. It was just such a journey to follow Bronte going across this kingdom through this world to visit all of her aunts. So the premise of this one is Bronte's parents have passed away, and in their will they send her on a journey to visit each of her aunts to give them a present, and that takes her on this journey across the lands to visit her aunts in all their different places where they do all sorts of different things. One of them tames dragons, one of them is a reclusive artist, one of them is very much a family woman but lives in a town where there are elves. So we explore this land and learn so much about this land as Bronte does, as she goes on this journey and discovers that maybe there was more to it than just delivering her parents' presents. And then I can't tell you the bit at the end that makes this world even more interesting to me, but there's then something else that's woven in at the end that fascinates me a great deal. Yeah, this was really entertaining and adventurous and would be a wild world to explore. A great, fun middle grade one there. Next up, we have the Mistborn world. Fascinating to read about. Would I want to go there? Probably not. In the events of these books, after the events of these books, I'm not sure, but fascinating. The magic in this world is fascinating. The politics of this world is fascinating. And I know that I've only read the beginning of this, and I know that this world will expand so much more in the rest of his books that I have not yet got to, because Brandon Sanderson is one of those authors that expands his world across multiple series and books, and they all tie together somehow. So I'm kind of preemptively putting this on here because I love the world of this book itself. The magic, as I say, is really fascinating. It's all about allomancers, who are people who can ingest metals. If you can ingest one metal, then you're a mistling and you can gain the power of that one metal. However, if you can ingest all of them and draw the power from all of the metals, then you are a Mistborn and you are rare and powerful. And these books follow an uprising, which is why I say I wouldn't necessarily want to visit, but it's fascinating, and I know that the world is just going to expand and I'm going to learn so much more the more I read, so kind of preemptively putting it on here to be the sort of world that's just going to grow and blow my mind. It belongs on this list, whether I know it yet or not. So maybe a little bit of a cheat, but it has to go on here. I loved learning about this world, learning what I have, learning some of the lore through these books, but I can't wait to learn more and read more. I'm very excited to see this world grow because I already love it. Next up, Nevermore. This was bound to be on here, right? I love this book. I love this world. This is such a fantastically built middle grade world. It is the sort of world where, despite the fact that it's all nonsensical and all wacky and wild and magical and crazy, it makes sense and you could feel it being real. At no point in exploring this world do you think like, that doesn't make sense. Because the way Jessica Townsend has written this and woven this all together, it makes sense by being nonsensical and it just works. It works so well and I would love to explore Nevermore. It also seems like a very dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing in a land like Nevermore, but would I want to give it a go and just have a little look around? Absolutely. Would I need a tour guide who knew exactly what they were doing? Yes. Am I saying I would like Jupiter North to give me a tour of Nevermore? Yes. That would be fantastic. It would just be so much fun because this world has so much to it. We've got the Brolly Rail, like that on its own, amazing. The Wondrous Society, amazing. All of the different like nooks and crannies of Nevermore and how the world kind of does its own thing is just incredible. Genius. Love this world, love Jessica Townsend's writing, absolutely adore Nevermore. And the book itself is also another favourite of mine, following Morrigan Crow, who's destined to die on the eve of her 11th birthday, when she is swept away to Nevermore. Fantastic. Love this world very much. Another one of my absolute all-time favourites, Spouselinger by Sebastien de Castell. Wouldn't be a me list of faves if I didn't have Sebastien de Castell on here. Similarly to Miss Schwab, like they're both going to make appearances, this is me. But this world is amazing. And after reading The Way of the Argosy recently as well, I love it so much. It's so expansive. We have seen so much of this continent, but there are certain things that lead me to believe that this world is bigger than we know, and I just love it. Through this series, we explore all the different regions of this continent, we explore their different cultures, their different beliefs, and we follow Kellen as he needs to work his way through the world. I can't say why because spoilers, but it's a wild journey that he goes on. He learns a lot, he experiences a lot, gets himself in a lot of trouble in all sorts of different places. But we learn so much about the politics of this land and how all of the different regions of this continent interact with each other, and it's just so brilliantly done. I can't even describe it. I just adore it. I love the world so much. And then the characters, the magic, I love it all so much. As well as, like, the main sort of magic. Like, we follow Kellen, who is a Jantep mage. The book starts as he's about to take his mage's trials. However, his magic has disappeared. But throughout the course of the series, we learn more than just that magic. There's a lot more going on in this world that we discover. And it's brilliant. It's genius. I love it. I adore it. 10 out of 10, would recommend. This series has fantastic world building. Love it very much. Yes, read Sebastien de Castel. Then we have The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. Can we just appreciate the beauty of the Fairy Loot edition of this book? Because it's gorgeous. And the world is gorgeous inside as well. I adore this series. We follow Nahri, who is a con woman on the streets of Cairo. She has an affinity for sensing people's ailments, and she abuses that in making people believe that there may be a little bit more wrong with them than there is, to trick them into buying medicine from her friend's apothecary. And when she's doing one of her healing ritual things, she accidentally summons a Jinn warrior, which exposes an entirely different world to Nahri. And we kind of witness that world through Nahri's eyes. We learn about it as she does, but at the same time we follow Ali, who is a Jinn in the City of Brass in Jadeyraereads. So we also see the inside workings of this world as well, and the politics of this world. So we see the world from two very different viewpoints, and it just gives you such a rich understanding of it. Although, to start with, this could be quite intimidating, quite dense, there's a lot to take in, I think that it's done really well. And those things that are important come back later if it does intimidate you a bit in the beginning. I think the world building is done really well throughout the series. And again, it's so expansive, like there's more to it just than the City of Brass. We have all the other elements as well, and I love how this magical world is hidden within our world. It's like just kind of layered on top, just hidden from humanity. I just think it was really special, really magical. Absolutely adore this. And again, with all the different sorts of magic, the different creatures that inhabit this world, it's just so thorough. And I love it. Next up, we have The Realm of the Elderling by Robin Hobb. Starting with Assassin's Apprentice. Now, I've only read the first two trilogies in this series, and again, kind of preemptively putting it on here as I know that the more I read, the more expansive and involved and interesting this world is going to get, and I already love it. Just the vibes from this book alone, fantastic. But when we interweave what we've learned from the Live Ship Traders trilogy as well, this world just grows, and I know it's going to get bigger. It's going to get more intense. There's going to be so much of it that links together, and I can't wait to have read it all to know it all, because I already think that this is incredible. It's a difficult sort of series to explain, but this particular book follows Fitz, who is the bastard son of the prince. However, the prince does not want his bastard son, and when he kind of learns of his existence, he abdicates the throne and runs to the countryside. So Fitz is raised by the stable hand. However, the king also wants to use him kind of as a political pawn because he's in a unique position of being enough of a commoner and enough of royalty to train up to be an assassin. I don't know how to even begin to explain this world, because there is all sorts of magic in here. There are dragons, there's mind magic, there's what they call the wit, which is communication with animals, and the skill, which is a skill that the royal family have to speak mind to mind. But there's so much more going on in this world that I don't even understand. I think we've barely scraped the surface of what's going on in this world, despite being 6 books in, and these books aren't small. Despite being that far in, like, we're definitely getting answers to how this world works, but there's so much that we still do not understand. I say we because I'm referring to the Elderling along that I'm reading the book as a part of. I just can't wait to read more. And it's a world I've fallen in love with being in. It feels very cozy to me now. It feels very homely because I'm quite familiar with it, but I'm still learning so much more. And there is so much more that I haven't even touched the surface of, but it's a very poor explanation, I know, but love it. Love it so much. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk to you about today is The Castle of Tangled Magic by Sophie Anderson, but more so just Sophie Anderson's books in general, because they all connect, and I love it when that happens. So Sophie Anderson writes books heavily inspired by Slavic folklore, which is something I love. So in this world, there is magic. There are various creatures. We have Baba Yaga in the house with chicken legs. We have all of the fairy friends we meet in this one, and in The Girl Who Speaks Bear, and I love the fact that each of these stories interweave somehow, and the end of this and the connection between them, I just love. The world itself is probably not as intense as some of the other ones I've spoken about today, but just the fact that these do all take place in a fantasy world. There is magic, there is Baba Yaga in a house with chicken legs, but it's also very homely and real and tangible. Like, you could go there. This is a world I probably would visit. It just seems so magical and warm and homely and accepting, and a lot of that probably comes down to the characters, but I love the way that the world interweaves between each of these stories, and we're getting a bigger picture of what this world looks like, and I love it. And I love Sophie Anderson's writing and her characters, and I'm a big sucker for Slavic folklore, so that also comes into play here. This is one of my favourite middle grades ever, so of course it was going to make it onto a list of my favourite fantasy worlds. Big fan. Love the way the magic works in this one, and how we kind of see another fantasy world whilst in this fantasy world, and how they connect as well. I think it's really cleverly done. I'm a big fan. This one is about a young girl called Olia who would do anything for her baby sister, and when she discovers that there is some dangerous magic that needs fixing, she goes on a little adventure to get that sorted. That is the briefest explanation I can give. But yeah, there we go. There are 10 of my favourite fantasy worlds. If you have read any of them, if you love these worlds as much as I do, let me know down below. If you have any other fantasy worlds that you would like to recommend to me, or just let me know what your favourite fantasy world is, please do that down below as well. But yeah, thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. If you have enjoyed, give us a thumbs up, and that's just about it. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me for a bit, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!